Did Penn State, the biggest disappointment in college football this year, just derail Nebraska's season? That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, I am here. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer is taping a radio show right now, and he is traveling tomorrow. So I am going to knock out this reaction podcast here on Saturday night. Maybe you're watching it on Sunday. Either way, you saw what happened on Saturday in State College. I was home for it, watching on TV like all of you. I will be back in the press box this coming Friday as Nebraska takes on Iowa, and then presumably in the bowl game, although I guess we'll wait to see the result this week and see if Nebraska has a pulse, because in some ways it did not on Saturday in State College. And that may be kind of harsh, but the final score was 37-10. Penn State 37, Nebraska 10. And after about the first possession of the game for Nebraska, when the Huskers drove 69 yards all the way down to the Penn State 2, Emmett Johnson had a 52-yard burst on that opening drive. And then the Huskers got stuffed on fourth and goal from the 2, fourth and goal from the 1, perhaps. After that, it felt like Nebraska was overmatched. Penn State went 98 yards. Penn State got a field goal. Nebraska got a field goal. It was 23-13 at halftime. TJ Lateef did not have time to operate as a quarterback and get the ball beyond those short-range throws, the screen passes. That's really all he was able to do in the first half of this game. Nebraska was able to find some space for him in the second half. By that point, Penn State had built a 30-3 lead. The Nittany Lions faked a punt up 20 points in the second half. Terry Smith, the interim coach at Penn State, who Matt Rule hired way back at Temple, gave Terry Smith his first job in college. Matt Rule may have just helped him and Matt Rule's team on Saturday night become a real candidate for the Penn State head coaching position. We'll see. I still think that's a tremendous long shot that Penn State is going to hire the interim coach and assistant coach who works for James Franklin. But it was impressive what Penn State did. And it was equally unimpressive what Nebraska did here. You have to keep in mind, and I predicted that a Penn State victory. I predicted Penn State would cover the spread, win by 10 points in this game. I didn't like the matchup for Nebraska. I didn't see 37-10 coming from this event. Penn State had won just one game since September 13th, heading into Saturday night at Beaver Stadium. And that was last week, 28-10 at Michigan State, which is a 3-win team this year, which is a bad team. We saw Michigan State give away a victory at Iowa on Saturday. That game ended right as the Nebraska game began. That's Penn State's only victory this season since September 13th. Now, it went to overtime against Oregon, which is looking more and more like a college football playoff team. It hung tight with Ohio State for one half of football. It took Indiana down to the last second or seconds in that game a few weeks ago in State College. But this is a team that had a 6-game winning streak and generally, a 6-game losing streak. And generally, teams that have 6-game losing streaks at any point in a football season are not good teams. Maybe Penn State is an anomaly, the outlier. Certainly Penn State has good football players, but for the longest time this season, Penn State did not look like a team that knew how to win. Penn State did not look like a team that was entirely motivated, that had its stuff together to be able to pull off what it did on Saturday night, senior night, in State College. So what does that mean for Nebraska? That's what's important here. We will talk a little bit about Penn State, more about Penn State and Terry Smith in this podcast. But what you want to hear about, what I want to talk about is about Nebraska. And it starts with that defense. It starts with the Nebraska defense John Butler's defense that we knew was vulnerable against the run heading into this game. And that's what gave me a bad feeling for Nebraska about this contest, even before this week. But when I started to think about this game in depth during the bye week, I thought, how is Nebraska going to be able to stop Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton? Well, the answer is Nebraska did not stop those two. They went for 204 yards together. It felt like more than that. It felt, I see Penn State after the game, I see that Penn State rushed for 231. And I would have thought Penn State was around 300, the way that game, just the feel of it. Penn State there were a couple instances where Nebraska was able to get some penetration and stop Penn State. And it was a hard-hitting game, I'd say, on both sides, although there were not as many hard hits from Nebraska. Sierra Wright, Deshaun Singleton, you saw Rex Guthrie, who struggled in pass coverage, come up and make some nice hits in run defense. Nebraska was outmanned against Penn State's offense and Penn State's running game, and I expected that going in. I didn't expect it to look like that. I didn't expect Penn State to be able to get the blocking on the edge, to slice through the Nebraska defense where Allen and Singleton were not being touched until they were 6 or 7 yards downfield. If that, there were times where they were 10, 12, 15 yards downfield before they were getting touched. Way, way, way too much running room, too many big plays in the run game. Both of those backs had 50-yard gains in the first quarter of this game, and when the quarter break ended, it was what, just 7-3. But you could feel at that time that the things were slipping for Nebraska, and it was maybe just a matter of time before the dam broke in this game. So, and not just the slicing through the defense, but the way that the two of them both were able to move the pile in this game. And some of that was Penn State's motivation to send a message here, Penn State's motivation to finish this season strong. I don't know how motivated Penn State is to get to a bowl game, and the Nittany Lions likely will get to a bowl game because they'll go to Rutgers, I would expect, and win next week, and some bowl game will come calling. But this entire season for Penn State, since James Franklin was fired on October 12th, has been about what's the future at Penn State and what does this program look like moving forward. And for Terry Smith and the players that were left over, it's been about pride, and it's been about getting away from that losing. And Penn State did it in a way against Nebraska that outshined any of its performances all season. This was Penn State's most impressive win of the season, certainly, to do this against the 7-3 Big Ten team. The Cream Puffs in the non-conference don't hold a candle to what Penn State did on Saturday night. So congratulations, Nebraska. You provided Penn State in a season where it's going to win no more than 6 games in the regular season and go to a bowl game that it'll want to forget for eternity. You provided this Penn State team with the high moment in its year, and you gave Terry Smith something now to go to the Penn State administration with when and if he gets an interview for this job as the head coach. Hard to say if that's going to happen. We've now reached the final week of the regular season. If he gets an interview, it's probably going to be like the interview that Bo Pelini got in 2003, 04, in that transition before Bill Callahan was hired, which was an interview just so Steve Peterson could say that he interviewed him. And I suppose that makes sense for Penn State to not hire the coach who was an assistant for James Franklin when the entire purpose of the coaching search that Penn State has been undertaking for the past 7 weeks has been to do better than James Franklin. So I understand, but the way Penn State looked on Saturday, you have to wonder what kind of a message that's going to send to Pat Kraft. And I suppose he could say in defending a choice not to consider Terry Smith that you have to consider where Nebraska's at in all of this. You have to consider that Nebraska, despite being a 7-win team, is a program that couldn't beat Michigan this year, that couldn't beat USC this year. that hasn't beaten a team with a national ranking since forever. 29 consecutive losses in that area, and that's not really what Penn State wants to measure itself against. So for Penn State, Nebraska provided the highlighted. It provided a celebratory moment. You saw Allen and Singleton both break revered records at Penn State. Allen passed Saquon Barkley and then Evan Royster to set a new school career rushing record. Singleton tied Saquon Barkley's 2 records for touchdowns rushing in a career and total touchdowns in a career. So for Nebraska, this means that you got to go fix your defense. You got to go fix your run defense. You need some size. You need some linemen. You got to do something. What Nebraska has in terms of physicality, strength, size, scheme, we'll say that up front in this John Butler defense is not enough. Nebraska maybe needs to get some help with the way that it's coaching its defensive linemen. I think that has to be considered. Matt Rule didn't want to talk about big picture things on Saturday night. Understandably, there was some kind of a crazy alarm that was going off during his post-game press conference. It sounded like the aliens were invading or something like that, and the sirens were going off behind 10 feet from Matt Rule when he was speaking to the gathered media in State College. I was watching on the live stream. He talked for about 5 minutes and said, "I'm not going to get into anything big picture. We got to get over this right now. It's a short week." I told the guys when they get on the plane, it's on to next week. It's on to Iowa. So when we come back after this break, let's discuss whether that's the right mindset for Nebraska, whether it's perhaps beneficial for Nebraska that it has to flush this game immediately. And as I'm recording this podcast at 10:30 Central Time and Nebraska's getting to the airport in Pennsylvania, it's moving forward and already thinking about the Iowa Hawkeyes. Is that the right thing, or does Nebraska need to dwell on this for a few hours and figure out in some way what went wrong Saturday night at Beaver Stadium? That's coming up next. All right, college football is here. You may know that. It's college football season. I think that's fairly apparent with everything that we've been talking about and discussing for the last 3 months. We could not be more excited where we're at in the college football season because it's getting to rivalry week, and then we're getting to championship week, and then we're getting to bowl season and college football playoff season. The energy in the stands, the tailgates, it's all there. There's nothing like it. But if you want to get tickets to get into the stadiums, it can feel like more of a battle than those games themselves at times, with the endless queues, the hidden fees, the prices that jump at checkout. That's why I suggest using Gametime. That's why I use Gametime for all sporting events and events in general. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Take advantage of zone deals. I love trying that out with zone deals. You pick the section, Gametime picks the seats, you save the money, or just go on and search for seats without the zone deals. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets, college football tickets, with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, Mitch Sherman of The Athletic back with you on this Saturday night, Sunday morning reaction show. Penn State 37, Nebraska 10. Nebraska drops to 7-4 on this season. Very disappointing, not just that Nebraska lost, but more because of how Nebraska lost this game. By the way, thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right, so it was 23-3 at the half. I think we knew the direction that the game was going then, and then Penn State rubbed it in Nebraska's face in the second half. I mentioned the fake punt, more touchdowns on the ground for Penn State after halftime. Ethan Grunkemeyer, the Penn State quarterback, who's the redshirt freshman fill-in for Drew Aller, who was there on the sideline Saturday night supporting Grunkemeyer. Grunkemeyer didn't have to do very much. When he did throw the ball, he was effective. Grunkemeyer, the Penn State quarterback, had one of the better nights he had the best night, I'd say, efficiency-wise, that a quarterback has had facing Nebraska this season. So Penn State, wow, 39 rushes and only 12 passes. Penn State had just 51 offensive plays. That's right. Nebraska had 69 offensive plays in this game. Penn State had 51. And those 39 rushes went for 231 yards, 11 of 12 for Grunkemeyer, 181 yards, 1 touchdown. He was sacked 1 time. No turnovers for the Nittany Lions. They were efficient and effective in everything that they did. And we talked about the defense in the last segment. Here, I want to get to the question of, so can Nebraska just move right on? Can Nebraska just flush this game and say, we got no time? That's what Matt Rule said. No, there's no time. We got no time to deal with this. We'll think about the ramifications of what it means that Nebraska went on the road and lost in a way that we've only seen twice in the Matt Rule era. Those 2 games would be at Indiana a year ago when Nebraska lost 56-7, and then the Michigan game in Matt Rule's first season, which was 45-7. Both of those games loomed for a long time in the Nebraska psyche. Nebraska had that intense, notorious Sunday practice after the Michigan game in 2023. A year ago after Indiana, Nebraska buckled down and went out the next week and played well at Ohio State. So I guess you can look to that and say, there's the blueprint right there. Do what you did last year after the Indiana game. Go out, give it everything you got against Iowa. And I don't doubt that Nebraska is going to have a great effort against Iowa this week. We saw Nebraska come back from its most disappointing loss of the season, I would say, until Saturday. Is Saturday more disappointing than what happened at Minnesota? I'd say I'm more surprised by the way the Minnesota game unfolded in the second half and how Nebraska just seemed completely listless at Minnesota. I didn't get that vibe too much from Nebraska on Saturday night at Penn State. I more got the feeling that Nebraska was just outmatched, that Nebraska was up against a team that was better than it. In some sense, that's surprising. But I also felt like Nebraska got outcoached in this game. I felt like on both sides of the ball. I felt like the offense was too predictable early in the game. With the freshman quarterback, Nebraska had to mix it up a bit. This was not the UCLA defense that Nebraska was facing. This was a difficult environment where the Penn State crowd, even if it wasn't a typical Saturday night in November crowd where Penn State's playing for big things, it was a hostile environment, way more hostile than anything that TJ Lateef had ever seen, more hostile than anything that the Nebraska offensive line had seen this season. And I thought Nebraska needed to be more creative on the offensive side in the first half of this game. Now you can say, well, they drove 69 yards all the way down to the 1 on the first possession. All right, that's fine. But playing from behind is a different animal, and Nebraska was behind immediately after that drive. It was 7-0, it was 10-0, it was 17-3, it was 23-3. And I don't feel like Nebraska ever got out of kind of what its game plan was to give the ball to Emmett Johnson on first down and try to create running room and then let TJ do things, preferably in some good down and distances. And he didn't always have those good down and distances. I feel like Penn State had Nebraska scouted well on what the Huskers' plan was. It was simple. It was similar to what Nebraska went and tried to do against UCLA. And I think Nebraska needed to be more creative in this game against Penn State. Emmett Johnson did still go over 100 yards. He had that 52-yard run, which went a long way to getting him there. 19 carries, 103 yards, 5.4-yard average. So no touchdowns for Emmett in this game. Lateef had the only touchdown for Nebraska on a really nice improv in the fourth quarter of this game, an 11-yard run. But, Emmett had a respectable game. He had a good game, going for 103 yards against Penn State on the ground, and he had 48 yards receiving, too, on a career-high 11 catches. So, yeah, it's a good game. It may get him among the 3 finalists for the Doak Walker Award. They will be announced on Tuesday, and I think Emmett's got probably a 50-50 chance or slightly lower than that to be in that group. But as for the question about Nebraska bouncing back, yeah, I think it'll happen. And I think the attitude that Matt Rule took on Saturday about getting out of state college as fast as he could, and both physically and in terms of what Nebraska's mindset is probably the way you have to go. Even if you had lost this game by 3 points, or if you had won the game, you have to move on, because Iowa is formidable for Nebraska. Iowa understands the blueprint and the formula to beat Nebraska. And guess what Iowa did on Saturday? Iowa won on a walk-off field goal by Drew Stevens, who has done the same thing to Nebraska the last 2 years. Iowa scored 13 points in the fourth quarter. It was 17-7 in the fourth quarter of that game, and Iowa won 20-17. Got the ball back in the last 2 minutes and drove the field. Got a 44-yard field goal from Drew Stevens as time expired, and it was like you might have thought Nebraska was there playing on that field in the Spartan green and white, the way that the fourth quarter and final seconds of that game ticked away. So Nebraska will be hoping very much that Iowa is not able to again do that. It would be the third consecutive year to win that way, and for Nebraska even to be in a position to play a close game like that against Iowa, it's going to have to rebound very quickly. All right, that established. Let's come back, finish this thing, talk about TJ Lateef, what his performance meant on Saturday for the quarterback position at Nebraska moving forward. And we'll talk some big picture stuff too coming up after this. All right, a message right now from FanDuel, sponsor of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel is there to give you opportunities for live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that last push. So check out those odds on FanDuel today. Get in on some NBA action right now. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, back with you. Locked On Nebraska podcast. Final segment, reaction pod. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Penn State dominates Nebraska 37-10 Saturday night at Beaver Stadium. The Nittany Lions are 5-6, as I mentioned, 2 wins since September 13th for Penn State. High moment of the season, perhaps, for Terry Smith and the Nittany Lions to have put this whooping on Nebraska. Rule got quite a warm welcome at Penn State. Many of the Penn State staff, including Smith himself, were happy to see Matt Rule. He was welcomed back by the staff of his alma mater, and then the night got rough for Nebraska's coach in the first few minutes of this return. So what does this mean? Let's look at this. What does this mean for Matt Rule's program in 2025? I asked the question in the open of this episode if Penn State derailed Nebraska's season here. And, I think there's a chance that did happen. Nebraska went into this game 7-3. You split these final 2 games. You're sitting at 8-4, going to the bowl. You can't look at that and say it's anything other than solid progress for Nebraska and Matt Rule and his staff to be 8-4 with a chance at 9 wins going into a bowl game after a 7-6 season a year ago, a 6-win regular season a year ago. It would mean it's still available. It would mean a 2-win jump over last season in a year where your starting quarterback, had to miss the final 3 regular season games and the bowl game, the final 3 plus the second half of another game. That was a loss. So yes, I think an 8-win regular season erases any doubt about whether there is progress to record in 2025. A 7-win regular season, I'm not sure I feel the same way about. It's going to be a wait and see attitude until you get to the bowl game, because a 7-win regular season could mean a 7-win overall season, and that's the same thing you had a year ago. So it kind of would ride on the bowl game, and you don't want it to ride on the bowl game. In fact, if it rides on the bowl game, I think it rings a little hollow, whatever that progress might be in the end. I don't think Nebraska can lose the final 2 games of its regular season and consider this to be anything close to significant progress in year 3 for Matt Rule. I think that makes this Iowa game one that Nebraska has to win in order to be able to take that and sell that to players in the transfer portal, to the recruits in the 2027 class, and even the 2026 class. Nebraska's not entirely done with that this staff is out and courting. And they're going to be talking to these these transfer portal players who will be signing in January. They're going to be talking to them awfully soon. At least there are going to be some kinds of communication. You want to just say it's going to be all by the book, fine. Then those conversations won't happen until January 2nd. But the players are going to be looking around in December. December is going to be such a strange month because of everything that's bubbling behind the scenes and conversations that happen with agents and whatever. We've never been through anything like what December of what next month is going to be like in college football. And we may not even hear I know we won't hear all of the stories. We may not hear many of the stories until it's long water under the bridge. But Nebraska sure would like to take something that shows tangible progress into that time to be able to have whatever conversations it's having, even if it's just putting something shiny out there for portal prospects to be able to see. And I'm not talking about the dollars, because it takes more than that. There are players who will not make the money figure the number one priority. It won't be the sole determining factor. And even for the players who it is, lots of programs in college football are going to have added resources in this winter, in this transfer portal cycle, to be able to go and build rosters with. So Nebraska has to have something else, and what Nebraska needs is to be able to show some kind of tangible progress in the regular season. And this game, this egg that Nebraska laid on Saturday night, puts it in a position where Friday against Iowa at Memorial Stadium is basically a must-win. Nebraska's got to go out there and finish this regular season on a high note, or it's going to go into the offseason on a low note. The bowl game can do something to relieve the pain that you might feel from November, but Nebraska can't have a 1-3 November. That's not taking things in the right direction, obviously. So, all right, that means there's a lot on the line. Nebraska will get back to Lincoln on Saturday night, Sunday morning, 2:30, 3 in the morning. You're probably listening to this after that, but few hours of sleep for Nebraska. They'll be back in the facility at some point on Sunday to start getting ready for Iowa. We'll hear from Matt Rule on Monday. We'll hear from Nebraska coordinators and players on Tuesday. Would like to hear from TJ Lateef this week. It would be nice to hear from Nebraska's quarterback after his 2 starts, and we may or may not. TJ has a class conflict on Tuesdays. Maybe that'll be a bit different this week with the Thanksgiving holiday, and I think they still have class on Tuesday. I know they still have class on Tuesday, but who knows? We would like to get TJ in an interview setting this week, and maybe that won't come until Friday. But so his day, TJ Lateef, the Nebraska quarterback, on Saturday night at Penn State. 21-37, 187 yards, no touchdowns through the air. He was sacked 3 times, no interceptions. 10 carries, including the sacks, so 7 QB runs for 31 yards of gross gain, 16 yards lost, 15 yards a net, and the 1-yard touchdown run. I thought he handled himself well. I thought TJ Lateef executed the game plan. There were times where he didn't have time to throw the ball. The first time he was sacked, it was a play-action pass near the goal line. And before he came out of the spin, the turnaround motion to be able to take a look downfield and look for receivers, he was getting sacked. And you could see the look on TJ's face when he got up. It's a credit to him that he held onto the football there. If you get hit that way and you have no idea the hit's coming because your back is to the defense after you faked a handoff, you're susceptible to fumbling. I thought he was secure with the ball. There were a couple of times where Lateef put his head down and bowled through Big Ten linebackers and safeties, and he looked like he withstood that well and did not lose the football. Great ball security. So that's an improvement over where TJ Lateef was at just 2 or 3 weeks ago in the confidence that Nebraska has in him to play turnover-free football. He didn't throw the ball up for grabs and put it in harm's way. Maybe a little bit fortunate that a pass wasn't intercepted in the second half. Zakee Wheatley had one in his hands, and it hit the ground, and it bounced back up, and he thought he had an interception. It wasn't an interception. And the officials overturned the call on the field, but that was a 4th down throw, I think, or maybe a 3rd down throw. Anyway, some other throws as the game got late, that the ball was starting to sail on Lateef a bit, and he overthrew some receivers. That's not going to be typical, I would say, of his accuracy. I think that was fatigue that was setting in through the game, and maybe a little bit of mental fatigue too. At that point, the game was out of reach, and he was trying to do maybe a little bit too much. He'll learn from that. I think he'll watch that film, and he was accurate on a great sideline route where he hit Corey Barney on a 3rd down completion. He lofted one over the shoulder of Emmett Johnson that I thought was one of the better passes I've seen him make. He hit Dan Key on a couple of nice throws that showed off TJ's arm. So I don't think there was anything that happened in this game that would make you feel differently if you were optimistic about TJ Lateef and what he can bring to the Nebraska offense in the Iowa game and the bowl game, and potentially moving forward with this Nebraska offense. I don't think there was anything that happened Saturday night that would make you step back and go, oh, all right, well, there he was against a very good defense in a hostile environment, and he got exposed or it looked different. I don't think so. I think for a first start in that kind of a situation, and considering what the Nebraska defense was doing to help him out or lack thereof, that he performed admirably. Nebraska needs to find a way to get the football into the end zone on that first possession. And twice it took the ball out of TJ's hands on that first possession. Once was on Emmett Johnson's 52-yard run. You saw a little wrinkle where Heinrich Haarberg came in to take the snap. I think Penn State got fooled on that. I think Penn State looked at that and said, all right, hey, look, they got the old quarterback, the tight end, the big guy who's a runner in there at quarterback, and it's a short yardage situation. So expect him to run a wildcat here or a sneak or something. It was a little bit too long to do a sneak, and Haarberg handed it off to Emmett, caught Penn State off guard. He could have scored. He got chased down. I don't want to say he should have scored because it was a great effort to get 52 yards, but I think Emmett would say that he would, of course, have liked to have gotten into the end zone on that one, and that would have been big for Nebraska. I don't think in the end it would have changed anything about Penn State's ability to run the ball down Nebraska's throat, but it would have been big for Nebraska to get out to a lead. And it felt a little bit like the Michigan game after Nebraska failed to get in. But I'm entirely agreeing with Matt Rule on the decision to go for it on fourth and short there, as I did in the Michigan game too. I thought that was the right call. I think it was the right call on Saturday night. A field goal in that situation was not going to win the game. Field goals were not going to win that game, and I think Nebraska had that mindset going in that it was going to take some points to get out of State College with a victory. So We'll talk more this week about what TJ Lateef's performance means for the Nebraska QB picture moving forward. He'll, of course, be back in the starting spot on Friday, Black Friday, against Iowa, against another very good defense, and we'll continue to watch everything that's happening with this Nebraska team. With Emmett Johnson, will he be a Doak Walker Award finalist on Tuesday? Can Nebraska take the right mindset to bounce back in short order with a short week against the Hawkeyes? And what can Nebraska do with this defense to try to figure something out so that they can be better in stopping the run? All questions that we will address this week and moving forward in the Locked On Nebraska podcast shows. So thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig is there to break down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and every game in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.